Grr. Arg. Hey YouTubers, I'm guessing if you've clicked on this video, you, like me, are a giant fan of Joss Whedon's cult status show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The reason I am actually dressed like this is because I am going to a Buffy the Vampire Slayer binge fest. It was fancy dress optional, but hell yeah I wanted to dress up. Here's a cheeky pic of my costume and what I was going for. In case you didn't know, I was a kinematically redundant biomechanical demonoid, aka Adam, the big bad of season 4. I'm so grateful for Joss Whedon for creating this series. I grew up with Buffy. It was the show of my childhood. And in a way, it was a guiding hand that took me through adolescence as well, shaping the person that I've become today. So in honor of the 20th anniversary of the original air date of Welcome to the Hellmouth, I'm going to give you a top 10 list of my favorite Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes. One thing I've learned from meeting other Buffy geeks is that people get so passionate about this show. I know how defensive people get about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Even 20 years on, we still debate about this show. So I want you to bear in mind that this list, this top 10, is my personal choices, okay? They're not always going to be the episodes that you agree with the most, but they're the ones that I have literally got so much love for. I've watched so many times and experienced a whirlwind of emotions watching. This top 10 was a really incredibly difficult task to do. I had a list of about 30 episodes that I thought were good ones that could get into the top 10, but having to choose between all these episodes and put them into a top 10 and get them in the right order, it was so difficult. And it made me think, if I was in some sort of apocalyptic situation where I was in a bunker and I could only have 10 episodes of Buffy, which ones would I want to watch over and over and over again? It's a real testament to the quality of the series because there are so many different episodes that could make this list, but I only have 10 slots and I have to just pick 10. So yes, it was hard. So a few honorable mentions of some episodes that I absolutely adore but just couldn't manage to get into the top 10 are as follows. Something Blue, Surprise and Innocence as a two-parter, Spiral, The Body, The Wish, Doppelgangland, Storyteller, Intervention, Graduation Day, parts 1 and 2 as another two-parter, The Zeppo, Tabula Rasa, and of course, Family. Let the spell be ended. And just like that, I'm human again. Yeah guys, the reason for my transformation back into human Luke is because I was in such a rush to get to the Buffy binge fest that I didn't actually get to finish the video. I was so hungover and tired and incoherent during that video, but I did want you to see how nerdy I was, so I kept a little bit of the footage in so you could see my costume. Except this time in my homemade Cladder Ring t-shirt. Oh yeah, go Team Bangel. And just in case you're wondering, yes, I did win the Buffy binge fest quiz. And this was my little prize for it. A signed collectible of the cast of season 4, and I'm so happy because it's got Seth Green in this one, and Seth Green was my favourite character, Oz. I've got number 74 of 200, so if you've got one of these, do let me know in the comments section. Or if you just want to have a rant about Buffy, please do let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from fans that are just as passionate as me. But yeah, so proud. And fun fact, our team name was the Evil Toenails. Alright guys, so kicking off the list, and at number 10 is an episode from season 2. Now, I should let you guys know that even though I know season 2 does come with its fair share of dud episodes, I would probably rank season 2 as my favourite season of all 7 seasons of Buffy. A lot of my friends will tell me that season 3 is the best or that season 5 is the best, but for me personally, season 2 is probably the best because of its operatic, emotional narrative arc that it has with Buffy and Angel. So it's no surprise that in my top 10, there are more episodes from season 2 than any other season featured in this list. So coming in at number 10 is the season 2 opener, When She Was Bad. So what do I love about When She Was Bad? Well, first of all, it's a written and directed episode by Joss Whedon, so immediately the dialogue feels more hilarious and more sharp. It also features this brilliant bit of dialogue between Buffy and Cordelia.
You're really campaigning for Bitch of the Year, aren't you?
As defending champion, you're nervous?
I love that. I also love that this episode explored the ramifications of what happened to Buffy at the end of Prophecy Girl. Buffy died. She didn't have a near-death experience. She actually died. That would affect the strongest of us. How we process the inevitable conclusion of death as a child is overwhelming. But to actually live your life and wield death as your own tool on a nightly basis is something that is way too much to put on the shoulders of a young child. And I think it's awesome that Whedon chose to address that trauma that she experienced back in Prophecy Girl, instead of just sweeping it under the rug and starting the season afresh. There's an emotional continuity that links the two seasons together. This episode is also good because it allowed the characters to show different sides of their personality, particularly Buffy. Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance in this episode is exceptional. I love that scene where she's in the bronze and that Chibo Moro song is playing and she drags Xander onto the dance floor. In one swift move, she manages to remind Willow that Xander has greater feelings for her. She also makes Angel jealous by dancing with Xander suggestively, and she humiliates Xander by luring him to a false sense of seduction. It just just demonstrates so many different dimensions to Buffy's character, and how damaged she was, and this was her way of acting out. None of her friends could possibly understand the ordeal she went through, as well as feel the weight of responsibility that's been placed on her shoulders. The role of the Slayer is something that she has to carry alone, but by the end of the episode, she realizes that she relies on the gang to get the job done. And her breaking the Master's bones with a sledgehammer was her way of getting closure. And that's precisely it. This is the closure of the events of season 1, and it acts like a symbolic ending of a chapter. We move on to the next chapter, which is season 2, which is a far more consistently entertaining series and story. And that's what's so satisfying about watching this episode on repeat viewings, because this, for me, is the moment where Buffy finally found its footing as a TV series. It had some direction of where it was going. Season 1 definitely had its faults. It had some pacing issues, it was quite camp, and the episodes were quite gimmicky. But when she was bad is ironically when Buffy got good. It still followed the Monster of the Week format, but it had an overarching narrative that carried all the way through the season. Ultimately, When She Was Bad is a great episode because it has great moments of character development for every individual character. It sets up the themes and ideas of what this season is going to be about, that being mainly the romance between Buffy and Angel, and it gives us some closure on the events of season 1 and starts season 2 off on an emotional yet entertaining note. Right, so coming in at number 9 is the very final episode of Buffy, and that is Chosen. Season 7 was definitely a mixed bag of a series, and I know not all Buffy fans were completely satisfied with the overall ending, but for me, I still think Joss Whedon managed to wrap up the series in a very satisfying way. It's the showdown we've been waiting for all season. Buffy and her army of potential slayers versus the First and the army of Ubervamps. We're back where it all began, at Sunnydale High, and I love that Joss Whedon brought it full circle, harking back to the harvest when Giles lamented,
"The Earth is definitely doomed."
Loved it. Willow uses the essence of the scythe and the voodoo of the Hellmouth to activate all the potentials into Slayers. It's a glorious moment of girl power. Buffy's speech is incredibly moving, and we see the little girl with the baseball bat, and she smiles as Buffy says, "Are you ready to be strong?" It's so uplifting and emotional. Go feminism! And Robert Duncan's score swells to this beautiful, heroic crescendo as the girls embrace their identities as Slayers. The action, the choreography, the score, it all feels very cinematic. Long before Game of Thrones knew how to do an epic battle sequence, this was still very impressive for 2003. And again, because this is a written and directed Joss Whedon episode, there is so much quotable, snappy dialogue.
Oh my goddess.
Gives me goosebumps. I also love Spike's deliciously English profanity.
Oh, bollocks.
And who could forget Anya's last words?
Floppy, hoppy, bunnies.
So fitting, so perfect. Despite the finale glossing over a few important plot points, such as why didn't they just wait for Willow to do the spell before going down into the Hellmouth? How exactly did the scythe intrinsically link to the activation of the potentials into Slayers? And why did the Ubervamps all of a sudden seem so easy to kill? Didn't just one of those seem almost impossible to kill only just a few episodes ago? But Joss came in and saved a limping series and gave the best possible finale he could. He went back to what the central premise of the show was and built upon it. That being female power, having it, using it, sharing it. Buffy's speech is so empowering in so many ways. Not only does it act as a supernatural sharing of power, but it was also a notion that the women watching could relate to. In every generation, one Slayer is born because a bunch of men who died thousands of years ago made up that rule. How does that not relate to women of today who are bound by the rules that men made up decades ago? But the message was clear. You can be the master of your own destiny. All you have to do is choose. And Buffy's choice to share her power is incredibly unifying. It frees her from her isolated destiny, and now her future is an open road for her to choose, making that final scene all the more meaningful.
Yeah, Buffy. What are we gonna do now?
Buffy smiles at the thought of an actual future. After 7 years of growing up, self-sacrifice, and saving the world a lot, she is finally granted a life of her own, embracing her role as a Slayer, but not the Slayer. It's an open-ended sense of closure and a bittersweet ending to a phenomenal series. To quote Willow, "That was nifty." Right guys, coming in at number 8 is another season opener and another Joss Whedon written and directed episode, and that is the season 3 opener, Anne. Yeah guys, this episode holds a special place in my heart because this is literally the first ever episode of Buffy that I can remember watching as a child. And I knew after watching Anne that this was going to be a show that I was going to watch religiously. For me, the opening scene of this series where Joss intentionally subverts your expectations into thinking that Buffy is going to be standing above this vampire's grave, only to be met by equipping Willow and a clustered backup team of Xander and Oz, was an essential reason as to why the show worked as a whole. It was never what you expected. I love the moment where Oz throws the steak thinking he's gonna dust a vampire in the coolest fashion possible, but completely misses and states the obvious.
That really never works.
This was the first episode where Seth Green was credited as a main cast member, and Oz was always my favourite character, so it was so satisfying to see that finally confirmed. I also love this episode because it ultimately didn't shy away from a difficult topic, like When She Was Bad did in addressing the topic of trauma, and explores the effects of grief and how it consumes us. After killing Angel, Buffy flees to LA to escape her problems. And seeing Buffy, or Anne in this case, abandon her identity and responsibility just shows how far she's gone. Emotionally numb and cut off from all that make her who she is. However, after being held prisoner in a demon dimension, Buffy finds herself again.
Who are you?
I'm Buffy, the vampire slayer, and you are?
Alone, outnumbered, and unfamiliar with the environment, Buffy finds the strength within her to pull herself up and face her problems head on. This leads to one of my favourite action scenes in the entire series, where Buffy is on this podium battling all these different demons, and there's this one shot that comes down on her which is so badass. She comes back to Sunnydale, reunites with her mother, and I'm absolutely blown away by just how moving this episode is. So at number 7, guys, we have a fan favourite and one of the most essential episodes of Buffy ever made, and that is the almost dialogue-free Hush. Like the season 4 closing episode Restless, Hush is considered to be a particularly ambitious episode of Buffy. It came about because Joss Whedon was told that the only reason for Buffy's success was down to its witty, pop culture saturated dialogue. So as a personal challenge for him, Joss wanted to prove that the show could stand on its own 2 feet, and so gave way to this masterful mid-season episode. 2/3 of the episode are completely free of dialogue, and that's because a creepy band of demons known as the Gentlemen have floated into town, and they have stolen everyone's voices in order for them to steal the hearts of 7 victims in the middle of the night so no one can hear them scream. Hush is cited as not only one of the best episodes of Buffy, but one of the best episodes of TV ever made. Stripping away the dialogue could have backfired spectacularly, but in the loving hands of Joss, it was hilarious, horrifying, and an insightful look at the value of communication and language. Without their voices, the gangs have to resort to other means of communication. Whiteboards, hand gestures, body language, but of course my favourite has to be Giles's hilarious flashcards lecture sequence, which brings a load of hilarious misinterpretations and miscommunications, such as Buffy wanking off the gentleman to death, and of course Xander thinking all the gentleman wanted was a collection of boobs. And Christoph Beck's score is what really tells the story. It's eerie, chilling, and it amplifies the tension to deafening levels. With only music to put there instead of screaming, it leaves a more horrific impression. And the design for the gentleman is so simple but so horrific. Those floating, smiling, silver-teethed ghouls with unblinking eyes and scalpels and clapping. Oh, it's the stuff of nightmares. And fun fact, guys, this is the only episode of Buffy to ever be nominated for an Emmy for outstanding writing, evidencing the brilliance of Joss Whedon because this episode only had 17 minutes of dialogue. But the sheer gamble to make an episode like this is why it ranks so high on so many people's lists. It's distinctly unique from every other single episode of Buffy. It's an episode that can be viewed by itself, but it also has some crucial moments of plot and character development. Buffy and Riley share their first kiss because their incessant need to babble is taken away from them, and they discover the truth about their identities, leaving them brilliantly speechless after they've got their voices back at the end of the episode. Plus, we finally get to meet Tara, and the building blocks for the show's most important couple are given their foundation. The moment that Willow and Tara connect still gives me goosebumps. It's amazing that something so subtle as holding hands can be so powerful, and also some cleverly layered foreshadowing of what's to come. Yeah guys, Hush is an amazing episode because it's a hodgepodge of so many different elements and genres which work so well together. It was funny, it was horrific, it had great action in it, it had romance in it. It was basically everything that Buffy was meant to be, whilst also being brave enough to take a chance at something different. It really is a gem of an episode. Okay guys, so coming in at number 6 is another episode from season 4, and this is an episode that doesn't normally feature on a top 10, but for me, I just absolutely adore this episode, and it is New Moon Rising. The reason I love this episode so much is because now that I rewatch it again as an adult, I can really relate to the character development that happens to Willow throughout this season. University is a time for experimentation and self-discovery, and New Moon Rising is a pivotal episode in the development of Willow as a character, and it echoes my own experiences of coming to terms with sexuality. Oz comes back to Sunnydale and wants to give things another go with Willow. Willow is then forced to come to terms with her feelings towards Tara. Confiding in Buffy, she tells her that it's hard for her to jump straight back into a relationship with Oz because she has feelings for Tara. Willow comes out to Buffy, and it demonstrates just how strong the bond between Willow and Buffy is. What I love is that Buffy's reaction is so authentically honest. She is shocked She calls her Will too many times in her soliloquy, and she paces around the room trying to process it. That for me was one of the most honest interpretations of coming out to a close friend who had no idea you were gay. It is surprising, but in the end Buffy tells her she's glad she told her, and by the end of this season their bond is stronger than ever. This episode also highlights the moral areas of grey surrounding the ethos of Riley. His philosophy is summed up by Buffy.
Demons bad, people good.
Something wrong with that theorem?
And Riley's knee-jerk reaction to dismiss Oz as dangerous because of his werewolf half just shows that he is a man of black and white. However, after Buffy has to come to terms with Willow's new sexuality, it forces her to implement the same level of understanding and tolerance onto Riley. By the end of the episode, he leaves the initiative and stands alone with Buffy. It's one of Riley's best character developments in the entire series, and whilst he may have been a bit of a wooden love interest for Buffy, he did have her interest at heart. And oh my god, let's talk about the ending of this episode. It's just Willow and Oz in his van, and it's their final goodbye. This is such a moving scene. It's a quiet, deeply touching, amicable departure between two people who love each other, but timing and circumstances aren't on their side. And it calls back to that wonderful scene in Innocence, when Willow first realized how deep her feelings for Oz ran when he wouldn't steal a kiss from her to make Xander jealous. It's just so wonderfully bittersweet. The same score is used from Wild at Heart when Oz left the first time, except this time it's played on a harp and it feels more melodic. And both Alison Hannigan and Seth Green give such stellar performances here. Every time I watch this, I burst into tears. That final hug that they give each other is just so heart-wrenching that I just end up blubbering every time. Whew. Even thinking about it's getting me a little worked up. To leave one another, happy for knowing each other, but wishing them happiness with someone else is one of the greatest examples of love on this show ever. I absolutely loved Willow and Oz as a couple, but sometimes things have to fall apart in order to make way for new and better things. But then the episode ends on an even sweeter note when Willow shows up at Tara's dorm in the blackout with a candle and she declares her love for Tara. And this is the start of something magical. One of the first mainstream shows to have one of its central characters involved in a lesbian couple. And this is why New Moon Rising is one of my favorite episodes in the entire Buffy saga, because it leaves me crying simultaneous tears of sadness and joy. No other episode has that effect on me. That's what makes it special.